Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Chaotic Tavern. I'm your bartender, Dan, and I've got a story to share with you. You know, one of my favorite parts of making content is growing a community. It feels good, and I mean that. There's something so unbelievably wonderful about cultivating an audience and connecting with them. Sometimes, I get super lucky and they'll join my Patreon, and today's video comes from one such individual. That's right, today's story isn't just any story, it's a submission from one of my very own viewers. A huge thanks for going through this god-awful nightmare of an experience and then choosing to tell me about it. Just know, your pain and suffering were not in vain, mostly because they gave me some quality content. That's not gonna pay for the therapy, but, well, that's your problem, not mine. Also, just a forewarning, the person who sent this has a touch of dyslexia, so don't be too harsh if there's some grammar issues. Buckle up, buckaroo, cause this is gonna be a long one. Like, really long. I wouldn't normally do this, but because this one is so lengthy, I'm gonna do my voice a favor and save the commentary for the end. Today's story is titled Pimp Rogue's Nuclear-Powered Bullshit by Artmonso. This was one of the few times in my younger years that I wish I wasn't so naive and was better at reading the room. It started with me getting laid off from my school job for the third time due to dumb paperwork and needing a new one for the time being. So, just my luck when one of the local RPG Facebook groups has someone offering to pay to run a game for him, his girls, and their friends. He would pay me in cash about 20 USD an hour for 1 to 2 sessions a week, each session about 6 to 8 hours a game. Pathfinder with the essential handbook to start with, and adding books from there depending on the players which we would end up having a very high turntable of. The one player who was consistent enough was the host. I'll just call him the Pimp Rogue. He lives on the edge of a well-off neighborhood leading into the poor, gang-infested half of the city I live in. The shared living room was full of different anime, video games, comics, sex toys, drug paraphernalia neatly put away on the shelves. At first I thought this was strange, but then I remembered I was in California, and everyone at the house was college age. So I figured this was normal-ish at the time. Mr. Rogue was a thin man in his late 20s who dressed and sounded like Shaggy from Scooby-Doo. He owned the house turned makeshift apartment with a massage parlor / traditional medicine shop. He used the medicine shop to explain how he knew everyone's drug habits in the local area and was trying to help them with his herbs. He was studying at the local community college to improve his current property management skills, and hopefully convert some investors to help him open up a proper hotel, in the middle of a drug and gang-filled area in the city. That plus his addiction to WoW meant he hasn't had any time to run games for his girls or their friends. He had me run a test game with some of his top girls, which at the time seemed either not too interested or had other things on their minds, like pot. Or food. Also, I was rusty then and hoped I could be something other than the living rulebook. The 3 college-age girls seemed to wear revealing clothing for most workplaces, but I was assured by Pimp Rogue that their line of work was very progressive about dress codes. It was kinda strange that they were wearing heavy amounts of makeup and their work clothing on their day off, but I tried not to pay much mind to it. I've seen stranger things in San Fran proper. This is California after all, and as my friends and family pointed out, nothing is normal here. So I run one of the free modules off the Pathfinder website. Me and Mr. Rogue helped the other 3 players make characters, a barbarian, a fighter, and a bard to the begrudging agreement of his top assistant girl. It was a simple quest to clear out an old tower for the local lord and maybe recover an old family banner if they could find it. The girls seemed to understand what was happening and what to do, but needed some reminding of the rules. A lot. They didn't seem too inquisitive about what was in the tower or the overall quest, just that they wanted to kill the few monsters there and get out of there. The rogue went off by himself and looted everything. He would find ways to avoid the traps and monsters. The girls would run to wherever the monster was thanks to heavy amount of metagaming and kill them. I tried to throw in descriptions of the ruined halls and destroyed rooms, but all I got from Mr. Rogue was, "Yeah, that's cool and all, but what is in here that looks valuable?" So I'd give him a roll for the loot he found. By the end of the game session and a brief closed talk in another room, I was told that I'd gotten the job. He would pay for the pizza and drinks and even offered his own meds from his herb side hustle, which I refused, not fully understanding what he really meant. He also wanted me to find more players for the group, seeing as his girls may have to do some long shifts from time to time, and he would like to get more business for his natural med and massage hustles. He said I had that innocent kid look, and it would be better if I asked around. I asked some friends to help join the game as I looked for more people to join from the local groups. The host asked me to run an urban campaign that wasn't too far from the main location. I had a homebrew city out in the middle of a stormy tropical isle I was building in my spare time, and now I had a group to try it with. The game was made to be very drop in and drop out, but had a story involving the group going from poor outcasts to wealthy, respected members of the city's political class. I had months of content ready and was excited to use it for a game I was DMing finally. At least I had been excited, as I underestimated how much of a that guy the host was, as he somehow bypassed most of the content I had planned for the group. I'm unsure if he was doing this on purpose or because he wasn't at the table for large chunks of the game, as he would pop in after taking care of some business around the large house/apartment a few hours in. Here are some notable examples of what he did to personally ruin or outright bypass everything I had planned for the game. The Inheritance. Wasted. When the party first arrived at the tropical city, the first thing I wanted to do is give them a proper base as the starting tavern. I had them start at the Rusty Flounder, which was more of a flop house than a proper inn. Some of the other players had said they had some noble background and wanted to check in on the other members of nobility. The hook I planned was that they went to the family manor to see it in ruins and an old butler with a small shack near the front gate of the manor. He would tell the party how the noble paladin and wizard's family lost their home to less than noble means. The party can begin by getting the key to the manor to find that the documents have been faked and a quest to get the manor back from the evil rival noble family. What happened was that as most of the party was looking at the ruined manor, Mr. Rogue spotted the old butler coming out of his shack and looking at the party, spotting the paladin's seal on his back. That's when the pimp rogue told me, "I'm gonna sneak up on the creepy old man and slit his neck open." Me. Wait, what? Like, it's a creepy man waiting in the shadows. I know what he wants, and I'm not letting him hurt anyone in the party. So he rolled. He sneaks up to the elderly man before the butler can call out to the old masters. Crits the old man, killing him instantly before any of the party members' characters could take note of him. He then looted the old man's shack, where he found the butler's journal, key, and some papers I had made into handouts that were meant for the group. I gave them to the rogue, who at the very least could pass them on to the rest of the group after looking them over. He asked if there was some kind of hidden code in the documents that he wasn't seeing, and asked to do some skill checks to look for them. I told him no, that didn't apply here. So he burned the documents in the fireplace as well as set fire to the shack. If I don't decipher whatever code's in the docs and no one else has as high skills as me, I might as well destroy what other assassin codes and orders he had, he said to me as he throws out the handouts only he saw. He then got the party back to a tavern to plan to guard a beekeeper's farm. I tried to salvage it by having a second servant of the old family be in the same tavern and ID the nobles of the group to share the same info I tried to give them beforehand. The rogue, who said beforehand he was looking for anyone watching them, picks up on the old woman and decides to split from the other group to talk to her. He opens by giving her some wine from his personal stack. The old woman: "Thank you kindly. Is that man... Please drink first, then we can talk." "What? Like, I offered you a drink, and in halfling customs, it's an insult to talk without drinking first." One diplomacy check later, the old woman is shamed into drinking the wine. "Oh, this is great. Now, is that young man..." Rogue, out of character: "Like, she has to make a con save or take stat damage." The rogue used his earnings from earlier to buy poison that would weaken normal monsters but would outright kill normal non-player characters like a level 1 commoner. So she fails her save and outright dies from constitution damage, as the rogue props up the body of the spy before rejoining the party, with the wizard and paladin glaring at the rogue who defended himself by saying out of the game they were assassins and spies for some kind of cult. That's how I would DM it anyway. It didn't help that later that session, as the rest of the party was gambling and fighting in the tavern basement fight club, the rogue snuck into the manor, the former, future base of the party. He looted the different rooms like the training room, the library, or the lab, interrupting my description of the rooms to speed up the looting of the assassin's lair, and then set the whole place on fire. Yes, I did talk to him afterward, and he continued to say that he knew it was the assassins, but that I had given my best try at hiding the fact. I sighed as I took his money and left. The quickest gang war I've ever seen. The next big hook was a gang war between two rival gangs and the City Watch trying hard to keep the peace. The party had done a number of smaller jobs, and one of the new players, a dwarf fighter, desired to have his big character arc be rejoining with his brother who was the captain of the Watch. The plan was to slowly dig up info on the two gangs by intrigue and combat missions. The ending was to be a big raid on at least one of the bases, with the surviving base becoming one of the big bads for the campaign. The pimp rogue, who was the unofficial leader, wanted to mail the captain a drawing of his ass, saying that we would never work with piggies, and forge the dwarf's signature on the letter, burning that player's plot arc for his own good. Hey, sorry to jump in here real quick. I know I said I'd wait till the end to give some commentary, but I gotta dive in here real quick. OP, did you drop these? Are you not on speaking terms with them? Please make up, for everyone's sake. And second, this is the really important one. I need to take a minute and make sure you hear this. Player agency is good. Allowing players to use that agency to destroy a character's entire reason for existing is not good. Okay? Okay. Friendly reminder to all aspiring DMs out there. You're allowed to say no. That's it. That's the instruction. Back to the story. They did do a great job of identifying and following a number of members of the gangs to find their HQ. The pimp rogue then got one of his girls playing a bard to use a charm to get into the base and a second charm spell to get the leader to lead a charge against the other gang's base. He then called the Watch and had their top NPCs come to join in on the raid of the base in the hopes that they'd get the reputation needed for the next step of the campaign, but then got blindsided when the pimp rogue offered the girls to, as soon as we are deep enough, we set the building on fire and lock everyone inside, officers and master criminals alike. Everyone fled, excluding the dwarf fighter, who was trying to RP at least his honor-bound bond to his brother and tried to warn his brother of the trap. He died with his brother and the player quit outright. The pimp rogue was kind of proud that he not only made the city safer from crime, but completely decapitated the leadership of the Watch, as a good pig is a dead pig, which was a bit of a shock for me, as I never encountered someone who has a deep hate for law enforcement before this. Finally, the thing that derailed the whole thing. The exposition for the Finally, the thing that derailed the whole thing. The expedition for the Deep Dwarves. It was after the party completed at least one of the major quests, breaking up a demon cult operating out of a cursed item shop. They were able to loot a large amount of gold, and the pimp rogue had taken a few levels of cleric by burning some demon summoning scrolls. So, seeing as 2 of the 3 major quests got killed horribly by the holy pimp rogue, I decided to start stage 2 early. The plan was that after getting a rep for being great, noble, and reliable problem solvers, they will be sought out by a gnome scholar who was trying to set up an expedition to the local ruin to look into an extinct race of dwarves that lived so far down that the light of day never touches them. He's been trying to find funding outside his homeland who has some fascistic religious types take control of it through a military coup. The idea was simple. They go to each of the guilds and trade unions to ask for assistance in supplying the expedition, each specializing in men, gear, and supplies to make it to the dig site to begin the dungeon diving. I hoped to open this up as something else for them to do when not running holdings after buying their way into nobility. First, they would have to complete a quest with the tropical traders who were having dire fruit bats moving onto the 3 growing islands with druids protesting the farmers, trying to make a living off of the fruit and crops there. Second, they were to help the craftsmen who would make their surveying and digging tools if they found out why one of their trade settlements was weirdly quiet and the inspectors they sent hadn't shown up. It turned out that a Lovecraftian cult moved in, killed off or converted the leadership to serve the Elder Ones, then started making a pair of lighthouse lenses that would be used to bring dark beings into the world. Third was the labor union who wanted the party to clear a rock quarry. Raptors moved into it to nest, but more so the raptors were attracted by the lizard folk and Naga. They didn't take kindly to the quarry company coming in and destroying their temple for building materials. So, they killed everyone, and now we're trying to place a dark curse onto the city. The runners who were sent up there to see what the delay was only saw the raptors and mutilated bodies and called that in. I figured that this would be a great chance for some morally gray RP to get the party as a whole more XP, seeing that they were flying through most of the planned content and story. It also could have gotten the party magical upgrades I was trying to give them, as they barely explored their surroundings except for the rogue and a few of the vets. Those same vets would lose out on the checks to the min-max rogue or to the votes on who gets the loot, as his girls would outnumber the client players every time. He would then sell off the magic items, seeing as he can't use them or even rent them out to the other players who saw it as the exploitative bull that it was. So, guess what happened? Guess what the divine pimp rogue did? Hell no! Deal with your own fucking bullshit, you commie parasites! The rogue didn't want to do any favors with any of the guilds or unions, nor did he want to pay them for use of any of their men, equipment, or goods, despite them controlling nearly 90% of their respective markets. So he put it to a vote, doing the bare minimum to seem like a leader. The rogue won the vote with 5 in favor and 3 opposed, the 3 no's being the paladin, who was just there to see how this train wreck goes, and the 2 new guys. I had tied the new players' introductions to the guild and union quests respectively. They left after this because of how blindsided this derailment was for their backstories and saw that this wasn't going to be the roleplay heavy game they thought it was going to be. The pimp rogue got the cheapest gear, gathered the poor, crippled, and elderly, and demanded that the people coming on the trip do the grocery shopping as a buy-in. By the luck of the die, they got mostly spoiled meats and donated food by the evil gnome cult, which would be following them. The rogue also did the medieval equivalent of wire fraud in the professor's name, who he had tricked into being his legal patsy for anything else he thought we needed. On the day of departure, he and his girls broke into each of the guilds and unions to steal their ledgers and then set fire to the record rooms with the leaders inside for good measure. So they were off 3 to 4 months ahead of schedule, and now I had to figure out what state to put the city in when they return. Or if they return, as most of the hands-on leadership is dead. The economy has been halted, the underground has a massive power vacuum to fill. The city folk were at risk of starving, as food would have to be imported from the mainland months away. The worst of it is that 2 cults of pure evil were about to attack the town. At this point, as well paid as I was for this, it was getting on my nerves. I was having to plan more on the fly. It was affecting my hunt for a more reliable and stable job. It was affecting my sleep and my schoolwork to the point I was having frequent arguments with my folks. It came to a head a session later. It had been about a week in-game since they took off for the dig site, and were about a few hours away when I decided to mix up the encounters by having a small bandit fort set up in the middle road they'd been using. The players would either need to pay them or take a long way around. The party needed to decide if they would fight the fort, talk the bandits into letting them through, pay, or go a long way. They chose to fight the small form of 80 or so untrained thieves, 30 in the front while the rest were slowly sneaking behind them. The 2 NPC leaders the party had with them had at least 100 caravan guards with basic training. So, with at least 5 to 7 player characters, the paladin friend, a guy new to the area in D&D, the pimp rogue, and at least 2 to 4 of the rogue's min-max combat monster girls, about 3rd or 4th level. The party was interested in some of the newer books of Pathfinder, so I decided to test out the mass combat rules and thought that everyone would enjoy leading the guards into battle. That's not what happened. being interested does not mean reading the rules, even if you print them out. The pimp rogue decided the best plan was to trick the workers into fleeing into the ambush with some of the guards to sell the bluff. He told the paladin that he had his back and to take the fort to plan a counter-defense. He said he had the spell power, creativity, and gold to make taking the fort easy. This was a lie, hoping that it would be a good enough diversion. He and his girls fled for their lives as, "You said that fleeing may be an option at any time." God, this voice sucks. Which I did say, but for more obvious reasons, like rolling stone traps, or the sewer monster they never cleared because of the pimp rogue's neat freak and OCD character trait that came and go as he saw fit. So the easy mass combat encounter became a bloodbath as the noob and paladin blindly charged the fort with no support, as most of the guards, being disorganized to say the least, made an easy fight turn into a massacre. The paladin and noob were shot down by tower archers as the lack of leadership made the guard squad rolls useless. Quickly, the guards were overwhelmed despite the better training and gear. The rest of the party made it to the dig site alone. After auto-rolling for the rest of the battle, more than 70% of the caravan was wiped out with only a handful of carts left, along with nearly all of the key NPCs excluding the professor and a kid that one of the former players befriended. As the decimated caravan rolled in, the pimp rogue asked me, "So how much gold did I save getting all the guard and trail guides killed?" I don't think I ever found out if this was his plan the whole time or if I didn't explain the encounter right. I know that I wanted to hurt this guy, in-game, for all the stress of his nuclear-powered shenanigans. So, for the next few sessions, the rogue and the girls, at this point I was running out of gaming groups to pull players from, were digging up the entrance hall to the dungeon as one of the massive skips in content left me no time to design the dungeon. The entrance hall had a pair of gate guards that were two massive black marble statues made by the Deep Dwarf's ritual blood rites, to drive back anyone who dares try to unlock the door to the elevators. The gate guards acted as high-level necromancers that would cause the excavators to go mad, then kill each other or themselves by sabotaging the digging in some way. As the dead mounted, the necromantic magic would kick in to turn the dead bodies of the people and animals in the area into undead monsters and horrors to defend the gate. I may have played my hand too early, for when they were clearing the area, I rolled on the random encounter pool to get a couple of trapdoor spiders. The spiders dragged the rogue into their hole and started to wail on the halfling rogue and nearly killed him. His girls were able to break into the hole and kill the spiders before they could finish off the rogue. So I might have fudged the undead creation rules a bit, and as they were leaving from the cave with the rogue in the back, the spiders, with newfound undead vigor, jumped the rogue and rolled a nat 1 on both of their surprise attacks. The rogue, who I forgot was a cleric up to this point, used to turn undead and forced the spiders as far back into their hole as possible. And the 5 of them set the webs on fire. This clues him in that something was off. He scanned for magic and found the statues, 20 feet below the ground. At this point, it got interesting again, if not fun, as it was full-on me versus him instead of me running for the party. I know that sounds bad, but I was under a lot of stress at the time, and frankly, I was mentally and emotionally done at this point. $20 an hour be damned. I tried to have the statues whisper dreams of unionization and coffee breaks. He and the girls scouted out the unionists, took the leaders out of range of the statues for a hunting party to talk about how to improve things, and then murdered them in their sleep and burned the bodies. They then tried to start heated racial tensions in the caves with charm spells. Rogue makes an example of a few of them by burning them alive on stakes, saying he won't tolerate bigots, and reorganizing the teams every few hours. When a cave-in and other accidents happened on site, he and his girls would assist the risk. When a cave-in and other accidents happened on site, he and his girls would assess the risks of saving the workers trapped. When a cave-in and other accidents happened on site, he and his girls would assess the risks of saving the workers trapped there. And if he cannot find a way to get to the cave, he would fill it with oil, set it on fire, and reseal it to be a makeshift cremation oven complete with smoke coming out of holes on the surface. Fuck me. I even had a rebellion due to all the nightmarish acts of cruelty. I even had a rebellion due to all the nightmarish acts of cruelty. The workers wanted better treatment or they all walk. The rogue and his girls hit everyone with sleep spells, seeing as there were about 50 or less of them and they were all low-level common folk. Excluding the professor, who was fearful of his life and tortured a few times on hints that he may be planning something. He and his magical girls reformed the walls and defenses set up earlier to keep people in and keep critters out, and murdered more by fire to make it clear who was in charge. Finally, the day came when they broke the seal to the door after a week of death and torment. He was proud of himself and was making a speech to his workers with no spirit left or even will to live. Some figuring that they'd be killed after or made into food, seeing as no one was sure where the fresh food was coming. Hunting and fishing stopped long ago, and the laborers figured cannibalism was at play. It was some druid spell I forgot the name of, but the pimp rogue didn't tell the workers that. So everyone else was just waiting for the end, as out of the 700 men, women, and children at the start, there were about 20 or so left. This was when I summoned in the dead that the pimp rogue missed. You see, in the digs, they were using birds to see if there was enough air in the shafts. Tropical vermin moved in looking for food and shelter, even bigger hunts like ferrets to control the vermin problem. The only thing they checked for is if the horses and other pack mules were dying so that they could be burned as well as the other bodies. So you should have seen their surprise when arrived packs of shadow rats, swarms of undead birds, and dog-sized ferrets made of fused bodies of smaller ferrets. As some of them had given resistance to divine magic, it made it harder for the pimp rogue to just use his holy pimp slap on them. It was a long and heavy battle as they were attacked by air and ground, both under and above. The birds didn't stand a chance, as the mass casting of Turn Undead made them flee wildly, but were still enough of a distraction to have the meat ferrets sneak attack from underground, and the shadow rats turned control to move around the tank in front line. I don't know what this is trying to say, I'm sorry. The birds didn't stand a chance as the mass casting of Turn Undead made them flee wildly, but was still enough of a distraction to have the meat ferrets sneak attack from underground, and the shadow rats turned control to move around the tank in frontliners and get to the squishies of the pimp's squid of casters. Okay. I don't remember much of that battle, just that I nearly got 2 of the 4 girls downed and the rogue had to spend the last of his healing bursts to get everyone on their feet again. The main boss was a flesh golem. When the fighting started, some of the workers hid in some of the utility tunnels, which collapsed during the fighting, killing all of them. This gave the black statues the bodies needed to make the flesh golem. I figured this was it, a TPK. There wasn't anything I thought they can do, as the big mass of hateful flesh dug its way out and was going up one of the 2 entryways to the dig site. That is, until the rogue called on the Earthbender. Now, originally, I only wanted to use the main handbook. As the game went on and on, one of the girls seemed more interested in the game than the others, and would talk to me after games about the rules and the more complex classes. She even contacted me on Facebook to talk about other nerd or anime topics. One of the classes she really wanted to multi-class into was the Elementalist. I decided to allow it, seeing as out of all the players, she seemed to have a spine and was willing to give herself real agency, even if it was just to be better at support casting. So she used her earthbending to collapse the entry on top of the flesh monster's face, then kept the monster in place so that the rest of the party could gang up on the monster's head and beat it to a bloody pulp. I failed save after save to get it out of the mud and dirt it was trapped in. The rogue and earthbending bard high-fived as they finally entered the dungeon that I barely designed, and at this point would just be stunted on by the rogue's BS, but I had to try. I knew what rogue would face when the cult caught up to the party. Finding witnesses in the remaining workers still locked up at the camp, the cult would have the blackmail needed to turn the city against them. Some of the cultists returned the survivors back to the city, and the rest waited for the party to return. A week passed, and I came in with all my gaming gear to see that another DM was in my place. The rogue felt like I was burning out and decided to have an old friend come in to replace me. He at least gave me money for the last game and for the game I was going to run. I played for the first game. The new DM seems to have taken my dungeon idea and expanded it, and seems to be about to counter the rogue's BS better than I ever can. I left the group and never went back. Epilogue. Months later, I ran into the new DM trying to join a game, as it seems like I have some kind of rep hanging over my head, keeping me from joining. So it was refreshing to be about to join a game again. I asked how the old game went and if he made any money from it. He seemed confused as I told him that I was being paid to run games for him, as well as the shenanigans he pulled on me. He figured as long as he had known him, the Pimp Rogue had been a huge that guy and min-maxer. He would have him take breaks as he would find ways to skip major encounters and dungeons. I asked, how did you solve that problem? The new DM, oh, he got too busy with his drug and pimping side gigs. Me, wait, what? I thought he told you. I mean, it was pretty obvious. Turns out he was trying to get a D&D based prostitution thing going on where nerdy clients would play with his hottest girls and maybe return for some one-on-one sessions. He soon found out his normal clients weren't that nerdy, and drugs don't move. He also became addicted to World of Warcraft, and it barely gave the Pimp Rogue time to plan. That was when I came in. I was the most innocent person he had ever met and thought he could use me to get in more nerdy types and get them onto the whole RPG sex drug thing he had planned. So the players I'd attracted to the table, he turned to offer them some private sessions with the girls for how poorly the game went. They would decline and stop coming over, giving me weird looks and excuses as to why they no longer wanted to be in the games anymore. Turns out my friends and colleagues assumed I was this guy's partner in crime at best, or at least one of his underlings slowly ghosting me. So that's how I updated my expectations of pimps to be less like boondocks and was a black sheep for my local gaming groups for several years. Note, wasn't sure where to put this, but knowing how strange this story sounds, I want it to be known that 1. I have autism and miss the large red flags. 2. Didn't realize I was ace until my late 20s, years after this story happened. And 3. Was pretty sheltered growing up. So, let me just start by saying this. I have no way of knowing if any of this is true or not. It's the internet. Nothing's true here. Things that you see video evidence of, they're not true. We're all in AI simulation. That game, Miiverse, we all fell in and we haven't gotten back out yet. Now we all exist in the goo and that's where we live. Something worth noting here, there's a thing we sometimes refer to as a boiling frog phenomenon. There are situations where you'll see things absolutely spiral out of control and you'll just sit there wondering how the hell it got this bad. I think a good example of this is the gaming industry. The current state of video games is a lot of microtransactions, AAA studios releasing flop after flop live service cash grabs, and beloved IPs being killed, buried, then dug back up, only to have their corpses used to plug and promote the next pile of garbage that EA wants to push. And it's not all bad news. There's a huge thriving indie scene in gaming, but to most normal people, the AAA mess is what they'll see and interact with most. If you took a screenshot of things now and went back to 2004 and showed it to somebody, they'd have no way of predicting how horse armor in Oblivion would eventually lead to Ubisoft implementing anti-cheat in single-player titles for profit. Dead by Daylight probably looks nothing like what people who played it when it first launched ever thought it would look like. And it's because these things are gradual. You're the frog and the pot of water is nice and cool, and you're not gonna notice it going up a degree or two over the span of a few minutes, or maybe even an hour. It's not until that bitch gets to a nice rolling boil that the frog realizes something ain't quite right. With regards to this story, that frog boiled real quick, like that pot was steaming before the little amphibian even made it into the kitchen. I'm not laying all the blame on him or saying he's an idiot or anything for that. When people see little warning signs, they often don't see them all at once. They'll see one or two and just kinda move on. But then they'll do that repeatedly. They'll pick up those tiny warnings and just toss them aside because, well, they're tiny. But you do that long enough, eventually when you look over your shoulder, you have a whole ass mountain of those red flags and they're about to come tumbling down on your ass. With regards to OP, these warning flags ain't so tiny. These are things that could have been recognized and should have been recognized as some pretty serious signs that something's not right. Autism's a hell of a drug, I get that. Everyone has it differently and everyone deals with it differently, but my man, my dude, no. Come on, be better. I'm starting to suspect OP is about to have one of those little learning moments we all go through from time to time. And I hope that for OP, this was one of those little learning moments we all have to go through from time to time. I have no way of knowing if this story happened this way or not, but I'm going to operate under the assumption that this is 100% legit for the sake of commentary, so OP, this is a story that never should have happened. It sucks when you have to deal with situations like this, and I get that. Trust me, my first campaign had so many red flags you'd have sworn you were in West Taiwan. For those who don't know, that's this little country right here. But you gotta take note of these situations and learn from them. But my guy, there's that old saying, fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, keep doing it until I learn my lesson. I don't know, I think it goes that way. Anyway, a huge thanks to everyone for watching. If you enjoyed what you saw here, be sure to subscribe for more content. You can also find my main channel in the description. I'd also like to give an even bigger thank you to my supporters on Patreon. You guys are a massive help, and I can't show my appreciation for you enough. I'll see you all next time for another round in the Chaotic Tavern.